The nice thing about taking pictures is that in Las Vegas, there are around some hotels, there are half-naked girls who take $10 for a picture. I'm not even naked. Anyway, ASP.NET 5, which is the official name for what was called, up until a few weeks ago, ASP.NEXT vNext. What it means to you, to me, to us developers, and what it means to Microsoft. That's the point, what it means to Microsoft, because my honest opinion at this time of my life and my career is that it's a lot more important for Microsoft than for actual developers and companies. To make my point, let's start reasoning about what it means to build web solutions today. We are talking about, essentially talking about web development on the Microsoft ASP.NET stack. The heart of ASP.NET, the beating heart, the pulsing heart, is still the core ASP.NET web forms and the runtime on which web forms runs, and even today MVC runs. That core was devised more than 10 years ago. I would even say 20-ish years ago. Okay, it was 97, something like that, when the whole thing started. It was, at the time, a different era. The point of ASP.NET was keeping people off the web stuff. Those freaking things like HTML, CSS. I'm a real developer. Yeah, I'm a tough developer. Web, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Yeah. Even Java was funky. C, C++, assembly. That was the blood, yeah, sweat, the real man that stinks, right? Web, it was freaky things for designers. So yeah, I can even write, because it's my job, because I have bills to pay, I can even write web applications. But please, give me server-side, strong, serious code. That was all about ASP.NET Web Forms, server controls, all those things. Just keeping developers off, limiting the exposure to JavaScript and HTML to the least amount to guarantee survival. Over time, consider that ASP.NET Web Forms with the .NET platform was released officially in 2002. So in a few years, the stack grew, even significantly, because more and more features were added and more dependencies were added, to the point that today the memory footprint on IIS required to just start up an MVC or a web forms application is significant. Or at least so many people, more and more companies complain about. Personally, I never had any trouble at all as far as IIS is concerned. I have nothing to say against IIS about its being horribly heavy, slow. For the websites I manage, and it's not exactly my company, but it's a company I do a lot of work for. It's a company active in professional services for professional sports. So whenever you look, I don't know if anybody here is passionate about tennis, but there are a couple of circuits of professional tennis, and we provide most of the services for tournaments. So live stream, live score, this on-site services. So we have a lot of web applications serving these needs. We probably have also quite a bit of traffic, but we never had any trouble with evidence against IIS. But yet, there is the sentiment that IIS is now slow. And fact is that, for sure, the footprint of most web applications today is significantly larger than it was in the past. So, according to this, a more lightweight web stack that is composable by architects so that architects can intelligently decide whether or not they want logging, whether or not they want authentication, whether or not they want output caching, and so forth. This is apparently critical to have. Critical for Microsoft in first place. For Microsoft. Because, well, Microsoft is going through a significant restructuring of the company. Maybe you may have realized that or not, but the core business of Microsoft is shifting towards Azure. If you don't get this point, you can hardly make sense of the whole vNext stuff. Technically speaking, there is nothing significantly new. No new features, okay, in vNext. There is an entire new perspective of things, but nothing that really changed your life. The way in which you write, the things you have to learn, there's not much on this side. Because the update is critical, but for Microsoft, because Microsoft has the problem now, faces the problem of getting new people coming on board, writing for ASP.NET, and then once there, driving traffic towards Azure, the new cow to get money from. Okay, how .NET platforms proliferate? There are, say, 14 competing stacks. Two guys meet and say, it's ridiculous. Oh, also, this joke also works for taxes. And in Italy, we know that very, very well. Because every new government we happen to have says, we have 14 different taxes for the house. It's ridiculous. We need to have one taxes that encompasses everything. As a result, we have 15 new taxes. And in .NET, we have 15 competing stacks, just with a glorious purpose of unifying as much as possible the platforms and the frameworks and the runtime environments. ASP.NET 5. Again, ASP.NET 5 is the umbrella name under which everything that is new, that was called, labeled vNext up until a few weeks ago, falls. It's yet another bunch of minor features being released. Okay, if I have to tell you what's new, I would say, honestly, I don't know, and I don't even care, because it's nothing really important. Because the real painful points of web development these days, there are, but have nothing to do with things that are being offered, or have very little to do with the features being offered by ASP.NET 5. Yeah, if you read at the press releases, you may learn that, oh yeah, ASP.NET 5 gives you a way to build more scalable, more testable, more efficient, quicker to code apps. You think and the app is written. You look at the developer and the app works. Sort of that. But it's marketing language. Oh, ASP.NET 5 allows you to use Mac to write Windows applications. Now, I don't know in Russia, but as far as I know, in all remaining world, it's not against the law not to use a Mac. Okay? But okay, if you want to use a Mac, it's your problem. Use a Mac, period. But the Microsoft problem is that everybody using a Mac and the number of people for reasons beyond me is growing, is likely not writing for Microsoft, for the Microsoft code. So potentially that is a customer not going to Azure, not going to use Azure for the data. And that's a problem for Microsoft. So Microsoft needs to enable writing everything, including .NET code and ASP.NET code, also using a Mac, a Sublime, WebStorm, Vim, OmniSharp, or this or that. But, okay, you say, well, it's a matter of creating an editor. Maybe Microsoft can create Visual Studio for Mac. The problem is not the editor in first place, because no one that uses a Mac today is likely getting a potential Visual Studio for Mac. They will keep on using Sublime, WebStorm, this or that. The problem is, when you have an editor, okay, you can type text and write ASP.NET files. How would you test? How would you run the site in localhost? You need to have a runtime that runs on a Mac. How would you deploy? If you deploy on IAS, fine, there's everything already there in place. But if you deploy on Apache or potentially on another web server, you need to have something over there, okay, that runs, understands ASP.NET. So you need to have a runtime also that runs on Mac or Linux. So things like Roslyn, things like Core CLR cross-platforms are all new features going in the direction of enabling every developer on the face of the planet Earth to write for a Mac on whatever computer and using whatever tool. This said, ASP.NET 5 is a new foundation for web development. And about 20 years after the first work started on ASP.NET, it makes even sense. So 20 years later, it makes sense that something new. Consider that typically 5 years in a software is the same as a geological era in the history of mankind. So 20 years is a very, very long time. Now, if it's a Microsoft problem, so if this whole new bunch of stuff comes out because it's a Microsoft problem, the first point that comes up is, okay, it doesn't touch me that much. I'm an ISV, I work for a consulting company, I work for an outsourcing company, so it's not my problem in first place. But in second place, it is. Because if it's important for Microsoft, and you are a Microsoft shop, sooner or later, eventually, at some point, it will become important for you too. That's it. Okay, now, keep this in background and move ahead to another point. When we talk about web development, which are the major concerns we have? I'm sure that using a Mac or using a Linux computer to write source code is not the major concern you have. Maybe scalability is a good, big concern you have. Probably another concern is that you want to have a website that is really device-friendly. And I use the term device-friendly instead of responsive, because as I say things, device-friendly incorporates being responsive and adds more. Because being simply responsible not necessarily means being device-friendly. For those of you who still have troubles making sense of what it means being responsive, and responsive web design and things like that, consider that a website built against tool that supports responsive web design treats a 480 wide browser window the same as a smartphone. So all that matters is the width of the screen. But you understand that there's a lot more than just the way in which information is organized. Because if I resize a browser window to 480 pixel width, I can even take down from the server 5 megs, and it's okay, because I'm using a laptop typically. But if I have a 480 full screen device, and say I'm walking outside under a 3G slow connection, taking down 5 megs makes a huge difference. It's not the same, or it's not the same for all applications. So device-friendly means making sure you recognize properly the class, not the name, just the class, if it's a tablet, if it's a smartphone, of the device, and serve intelligently from the server just the amount of markup that makes sense for the particular scenario. And on top of this, but strictly related, ad hoc use cases. Because when you create a website that has to be consumed from within certain classes of devices, and that's a strict requirement you get from customers, it also means that you may need to have ad hoc use cases. So maybe select 20% of the features you have on the full site and implement only those, serve only those, and maybe add some extra specific for mobile use cases when the site is visited using a smartphone, a tablet, a mini tablet, whatever it is. These are the challenges, the true challenges of web development today, and none of them is specifically addressed, maybe scalability, in ASP.NET 5. Oh, this is a common statement. Scalability is at the foundation of modern web. It looks like no website can be built if it's not fully scalable. But again, I don't think it's against any law in any country to build and put in production a website that doesn't scale. Because scalability, it's just the ability of a website to keep a decent level of functionality when the number of users grows. But if the number of users is relatively stable, so it doesn't have peaks, or the curve of customers because of the success of the product doesn't go like this, you don't have scalability problems. But even if, thanks God, the curve goes up like this in terms of the success, the visitors, the users, well, at some point, you stop, you have the money to invest, to rebuild the website at some point. Facebook was not built in a day. Was built in several places, in several steps. And the fact that Facebook is now a combination of frameworks, it's PHP, it's part HTML, part it's a SPA, something is Cassandra, something is Mongo, something, it's because of this, of its growth over the years. Nobody started on day one, okay, let's build a website that can scale from 0 to a billion of users. These are the typical stupid things that you hear from technical evangelists at technical conferences. It's stupid, you know. Especially in the United States, it's common to hear go at conferences and find talks, oh, come to hear my session and you will learn how to build scalable apps from zeros to 1 million users. You think I'm an idiot? What? You know, it's just totally nonsense. In fact, this guy, I don't know the name of this guy, okay? He has a very, straight to the point tip. as far as scalability is concerned. You don't have scale problems. Your code just sucks. Okay? This is a picture that I captured not that many weeks ago from a report from a PHP conference. I retweeted this, and it got maybe 500 retweets more. So this is, I don't know the name of this guy, but he's one of the most popular, probably, speakers. Now, because of this, you don't have scale problems. Your code just sucks. A piece of truth. Most of the time, it is as simple as this. ASP.NET 5, so, doesn't specifically address any of the, let's say, UX-specific problems of web apps that were represented in the pyramid: scalable, device friendliness, and use cases. ASP.NET 5 is all about the underlying infrastructure you don't see, but it's still important to run web applications. And now, this is not a video game, okay? This is a summary. So suppose that I am the CTO of a company. I walk happily towards the future, sorry for the back, and at some point, oh my God, and now what? Here, this or that? It's like this. For any CTO, for any architect, any people responsible for making decisions, today we are driving straight, and the end at some point, oh my God, I have to brake, because there is, right or left, and you have to make a choice. You have to make a decision. On the left, on the green side, it's, business as usual. It's a Microsoft problem. It's not my problem. I keep on doing things the same way that I've done for years. I keep on using the same frameworks, whether web forms, whether MVC, whether nothing of them, none of them, and I keep on doing single-page applications using Angular and using maybe PHP to implement server-side services. I just ignore. And if I'm using Microsoft technology, I keep on using the same ASP.NET as today. Regardless of the fact that MVC switches from version 5.2 to version 6, ignoring the fact that there is now a 4.6 web forms with really minor changes, it's business as usual. What's on the other side? You go on, you take the ASP.NET 5 route. What does it mean? You start using a completely different framework. That's it. It looks a lot like the old one, but it's different. It's different, period. It has a subset of the classes, and in some cases, it also has breaking changes. So even when the same classes are available, they may have, in some cases, a different API, public API. So to cut a long story short, if you choose ASP.NET 5, be prepared to write for a new framework that is kind of familiar, because it's similar, but it's new. And don't waste time thinking and whining about backward compatibility. Be prepared to that, period. It's more or less what happened when Microsoft introduced .NET to Visual Basic developers. VBNet was close to VB6, but a few things were different. I think that the parallel, the match, stands. And some companies decided to keep on doing business using VB6, and there are quite a few line of business applications still running on VB6. It's not just, you say Italy because Italy is the third world. No, I'm talking about Germany. I have 2 customers in Germany who hired me to help them rebuild the system using CQRS and even sourcing architectures, because they had, for 17 years in production, a VB6 application. So, you know, I'm not talking about a tech company. I'm talking about a manufacturing company. So there are factories who run for 17 years on top of a VB6 system. So again, it's a matter of decision. But if you think that ASP.NET 5 gives you the power you need today, allows you, if you need to scale from 0 to 1 million users in a week, okay, target 1 million users at that point, I would say, since the beginning, so don't care about scalability. Okay, ASP.NET 5 is, if it sounds perfect for you, fine, okay, makes sense. But at that point, stop complaining about backward compatibility. Just program the best you can against ASP.NET 5. I mean, it's not right or wrong choice, matter of choice. It's just matter of having 2 choices. And the problem is that the 2 choices are not refundable, in the sense that if you take the road on the left, you can only go back. You cannot turn right at some point and join the other route. There is no point of contact beyond this crossroad between the 2 branches. If you decided today to go the current ASP.NET route, all that you can do in the future is dropping that code and starting from scratch on ASP.NET 5 or whatever else will be replacing ASP.NET 5 in 5 years. Don't expect migration paths. Don't expect shortcuts. You drop that and rewrite from scratch. So it's a business decision in the end. And it's really impossible. I will have a slide later on where I try to give some advice on I think I will take 5 different scenarios, what you have today and what you can be doing in the next couple of years. But it's just the typical situation where you need to do some brainstorming, maybe hire someone who helps you, deciding, but it's a business decision. Yeah, 3 common sense rules. Just a summary of what I already said. It was a critical upgrade for Microsoft, but because of that, and because Microsoft is betting the company on getting more and more people attracted to the ASP.NET platform and bringing traffic and data and money to Azure, it becomes important for you if you are a Microsoft shop. If you have today products and platforms and sites and whatever using the ASP.NET platform. It may not be an issue for you today, but in the future is ASP.NET 5, period. That's it. And if you choose, if you choose today ASP.NET 5, be aware also that it doesn't address all of the real problem of web development today. Because whether you stay to the current ASP.NET, whether you go to ASP.NET 5, the device friendliness and the UX, user experience issues are to be solved regardless. Maybe with scalability you are easier. It would be easier for you to address scalability if you take ASP.NET 5, but only because ASP.NET 5 runs, I will show you details in just a few slides, runs on a runtime that is composable. So you can take easily and quickly off things you don't need. because the pipeline and the memory footprint is smaller. But if your code sucks, okay, there's nothing, really nothing, that ASP.NET 5 can do for you. All that it can do is giving you a lightweight runtime environment, the most lightweight it is possible. No more than this. Okay, this is a bird's eye view of the architecture of ASP.NET 5. There is a runtime, which is new. And new means that it has no, for example, no dependency on system.web. On top of the runtime, there is a hosting layer, and there is Roslyn. Together, hosting and runtime are just a way to generalize the subsystems that make up today IaaS. Today, I would say that you see the bottom three layers of this slide, so runtime, hosting, and the other configuration, file system, blah, blah, blah. Those three layers today are for the most part exposed as a single black box called IaaS. So the architecture makes evident, makes clear that there are layers, and each of the layers and each of the components in the layers are, for the most part, fully replaceable. So, for example, the configuration system is no longer bound to web config. The file system is abstracted, and it's no longer hard-coded to be NTFS, but it can be the file system you find on Linux or the file system you find on a Mac. Dependency injection works from top to bottom of the stack. So, say, even in the core MVC, everything is fully replaceable and injectable. Today, ASP.NET MVC allows you to replace components, runtime components, but it does that through the service locator pattern, which is the only pattern you can use to extend and make injectable a framework that exists. But the theory of design patterns says that if you start from the scratch building something, it's much easier to design that using the dependency injection pattern. So again, it's not a matter of functionality, but it's a matter of just pure design of the code. HTTP abstractions, it's the same thing we had through MVC only, okay, like mocking, the ability to mock the HTTP context. And on top of all this, we have a routing, core MVC, and Razor. In ASP.NET 5, finally, thanks God, we will have actually the unification of Web API and ASP.NET MVC on the same runtime. Now, just to keep on kidding on content of some American conferences, too many times I've been there and attended sessions like Web API is the future. To me, Web API always looked like a completely useless piece of code. What's the purpose of that? I mean, the only purpose of Web API is to make it simpler for web forms applications to call via jQuery into endpoints instead of using WCF services running HTTP transportation. It's a much more efficient way of doing that. Simpler and more efficient, okay? What I found just close to my concept, my definition of being an idiot in Web API is that they use the same namespaces, the same class names with a different implementation than MVC. So you have a controller class in Web API and a controller class in MVC. They do mostly the same, but they belong to different DLLs. Why? Why should I, in an MVC application, bring a different runtime environment, a different set of DLLs, enlarge the memory footprint to call a controller? Oh, because a web API, it returns you JSON. But you can do the same, exactly the same, also in plain MVC. Yeah, but the web API runtime is more scalable. Yes, but you are bringing extra stuff in memory just to be scalable on a single call. Who's the idiot here? Yeah, you don't have scale problems. Your code just sucks. So now we have at least a little bit of things being clarified. There is just one pipeline for every HTTP request, which is the pipeline of web API. Now MVC in ASP.NET 5 is going to be integrated in that pipeline. So any dependencies, because up until now, okay, ASP.NET MVC uses the runtime pipeline shared with web forms, which is tightly coupled to system.web. This changes. The pipeline of MVC in ASP.NET 5 is the same as Web API, and there is no support for web forms. So ASP.NET 5 means MVC for generating HTML. That's the only option you have, or maybe web pages. But still, Razor views are the only way to produce and to lay out HTML. And then the routing is the same as it was for MVC. So at least now we have just one pipeline, more lightweight and hopefully more scalable. Okay. Roslyn. Now, if from a Mac, say, you are using, I don't know, WebStorm to write your ASPX, Razor views, whatever, your C# file, okay. Then you test local because you are using locally files. How would you compile those files? You need to have compiler classes. Roslyn. Roslyn can take source files and compile in memory, which makes for a much faster experience, and also enables makes much easier, okay, to enable cross-platform compilation of ASP.NET files. So it's a tool that serves a specific purpose. Roslyn is not going to change your life as developers. It's not the best invention after object orientation. There was a talk at a US conference with a title like that. Okay, Roslyn is the most important thing that happened to developers after object orientation. Yeah, and it's done from the same speaker who 3 years ago said MEF is the best thing happened to developers after object orientation. Okay. You know what MEF? I think it's a Microsoft Extensibility Framework.
Something nobody uses.
Oh yeah, exactly, yeah. It would be, it was supposed to be a better Unity, okay? It's sort of an IOC framework. The nice thing about MEF is that it's native part of the .NET framework, and you don't have to install any extra NuGet package to get IOC. This is the only good aspect. But MEF what? Runtime, a new runtime environment, and the most important part of this is that it loads up the CLR, okay? It loads up one of 3 possible CLRs. So far, it runs just one. Now it can choose, you can configure that so that the runtime loads up 1 out of 3. In the runtime, typically the memory footprint is about 1/10. 30K for each request. 30K now, around 3 to 5 Ks in ASP.NET 5 because of the cuts in the memory references. The runtime uses loaders to resolve dependencies. The nice thing is that it can, of course, resolve statically referenced packages, those that you add to the project via add reference in Visual Studio. But also it can use ad hoc loaders, and specifically Roslyn loaders and NuGet. NuGet loaders. I think that means that if you reference NuGet packages, and I'm afraid there will be no other way than this to reference packages, and then you deploy source code, and the runtime is able to connect to NuGet if NuGet happens to be available at that time, downloads everything and starts. Otherwise, even if you deploy something on a local machine, oh, I'm sorry, NuGet is down, and you have 2 ways to start the application. The CLRs, 3 types, 3 flavors. The classic CLR, which is the CLR we know today, just upgraded to the version 4.6 of the .NET framework. And then on Windows, so on IIS only, there will be something called Core CLR, which has a shrink-wrapped version of the .NET framework. Technically, it's called .NET Core 5. Approximately 1/10 of the today's .NET framework, full .NET framework. The difference is that a few libraries are missing, so just dropped, and a few others have been refactored, even in the public API, essentially to cut dependencies. These are the points that make ASP.NET 5 essentially a different kind of animal compared to today. And then there is the cross-platform Core CLR, which is essentially the same running on Mac and Linux. Now, the interesting part here is that Microsoft is committed to recreating the core, the .NET Core 5, so this shrink-wrapped version of the .NET framework, natively for Mac and Linux. You say there is Mono already. Yes, the common understanding is that the core platform, Core CLR, will replace Mono in the long run. For the moment, the Mono guys will help Microsoft building this kind of thing. So for a few weeks, months, years, I don't know, centuries, I don't know, Mono and Core CLR will work together. So we have 16 new frameworks. For a while, and hopefully at some point the number starts being reduced. ASP.NET 5 is the first example, and probably the unique example of application that runs on the core CLR. Scalability again. Okay, let's say that the idea behind ASP.NET 5 and the core CLR is promotes a different idea of scalability that is essentially horizontal scalability, where typically instead of having vertical stacks, vertical layers, or even tiers, you tend to write web applications as a very compact single-tier apps, and you duplicate horizontally using web roles, typically. So that's the idea. And for this purpose, for this idea of scalability, of achieving scalability, ASP.NET 5 gives you the best tools for the simple reason that it cuts down whatever can be cut down. %% NuGet. Yesterday, as I was looking into these slides to prepare to refresh this talk, I run into this. Now, actually, the picture was a chicken nugget. I just, a little bit photoshopped the thing to share my vision of this future, like McDonald's. My daughter is crazy for chicken nuggets. I have several friends who go crazy for chicken nuggets. I also have friends and colleagues who love nougat, so chicken nuggets. Okay, more serious. Now, this is, I think, the most important part of the story, of today's story. Should I stay or should I go? Again, it's hard to make, to give, straight. Only Americans are sure about it. Oh yeah, if your T-shirt is red, do this. If your T-shirt is blue, do that. It's not like this. So let's say, suppose you have today a web forms site, large web forms site. Large and still web forms because it was written, development started years ago. It's critical from the business perspective, and the customer is not willing to pay money to refresh the site as Microsoft or as a new JavaScript framework comes out. But after a few years of honored service, it could make sense to plan a significant rewrite today of any web forms site. Now, what should you do? Before ASP.NET 5, and so up until last spring, I was recommending to customers in this situation to slowly move to MVC. And because web forms and MVC share the same runtime environment, the same underlying machinery, if you create a new MVC site, or if you just add references to MVC DLLs, and you start putting controller classes into the same project, you can have some requests served by MVC and some others, those that specifically target default or whatever it is, ASPX, being served by ASP.NET. So MVC and ASP.NET Web Forms can live side by side. So in this way, you can keep your core code today in Web Forms and slowly make some porting of some use cases to MVC. At the end of the transition, your site will be fully MVC. But now, with ASP.NET 5, there is another point to consider. If you go to MVC this way, so sharing web forms and MVC together, you are cutting. You are staying the current ASP.NET. So you're taking the green or the left turn, which is a no return route from the future, because the future, like it or not, is MVC 5. If you consider that a web forms application requires a significant rewrite, and the step going step by step towards MVC is still a complete rewrite, except that it takes a longer time, but it's still a rewrite. So if you have to plan a rewrite, at this point, I would say, why not going straight on MVC 5, ASP.NET 5, I'm sorry. In general, unless you are already doing some work, and if you have done, and I have a customer in this situation, they have done already some work moving towards MVC. And yeah, it's not clear, it's not obvious. what to do now. If undo the work and start from scratch, just essentially admitting we have wasted a bit of money, or keep on this way with a certainty that at some point we have to start from scratch again. It's a business decision again. It's nothing technical. Web forms with plenty of silver light. So in this case, web forms is only used as a container, and most of the work is done using Silverlight. I would say stay. Don't do anything. Whatever you do is a complete rewrite. So if you have to rewrite, okay, go MVC 5, period. But because you have, well, in this case, it's a significant rewrite, even harder because of Silverlight, and because of the different capabilities you have in Silverlight. So there is nothing you can reuse, really nothing. So stay, but verify that if you stay, if you postpone rewrite, you don't hurt your business significantly. Server-side MVC, 50-50. So you have already an MVC website. It works. What should you do? Just rewrite for ASP.NET 5? Again, I mean, it's up to you in the sense that if you feel that your site is slow and your code doesn't suck, okay? Because if the code sucks, fix the code. Otherwise, yeah, it's 50-50. Single-page applications. I think that this is the easiest probably, because if you are using today a single-page application, I don't see the point of using ASP.NET. All that you are using is a host for a bunch of HTTP web services. So it's all about the back end. If the back end is fine, gives you the performance you need, fine, stay. Otherwise, well, consider rewriting the back end. But rewriting the back end, if it's slow today, it's probably because the code sucks. It's the API, the HTTP services that you expose that have some issues, some problems, some trouble. It's not the host. The host can help you, okay? But actually, I would really investigate first if there are issues, performance issues with the code, if the amount of data being returned, the chatty nature of the API. I would look into that first and then consider what to do. Make a decision about what to do. Okay, so back to the crossroad. In summary, ASP.NET 5 cannot be ignored for too long unless you say bye-bye to Microsoft. It's a new foundation for the web stack, and it doesn't address the real painful points of web development today, which are primarily making pages, screens, device friendly, which means minimizing the amount of data being served and optimizing the user experience through ad hoc use cases. That's it. Thank you for your time.